Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever sat in a room, smiling, while the people around you quietly plotted your downfall in a language they were sure you didn't understand? No? Well, Amara Nwosu has. And tonight, I'm going to tell you exactly how a woman worth billions of naira sat in her own fiancé's living room, sipping chilled zobo, scrolling calmly through her phone, while his mother called her a bush woman with city money. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't even look up, because Amara understood every single word.
Let's rewind. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before the wedding invitations, before the gold-plated engagement ring, before Mama Ngozi started smiling at her like a hungry lioness who had just spotted a very expensive gazelle. Sit back. Get your malt, get your zobo, get whatever keeps your hands busy. Because, sister, this one is long and this one is juicy. If you've watched our stories before, you already know the drill. Comment your predictions below, because trust me, you will not see where this one ends up. And if this is your first time here, welcome to the family. Please subscribe, because once Amara opens her mouth in chapter 3, you are going to need somebody to scream with. Now, let's begin properly. Amara Chidinma Nwosu was 41 years old, and by every reasonable standard, she was winning at life. She had inherited her father's textile and logistics company at 32, when most of her mates were still trying to convince their bosses to approve a 2-week leave. In 9 years, she had turned Nwosu Textiles from that fabric company near the market into a name that made suppliers in Kano, Aba, and even Guangzhou sit up straight when her assistant called. She lived in a duplex in Lekki with a compound so quiet you could hear the generator 2 houses down apologizing for existing. She had 2 cars, a driver named Baba Segun who had strong opinions about Lagos traffic and stronger opinions about her love life, and a house girl, Blessing, who Amara insisted was staff, but who everyone knew was actually Amara's 3rd best friend, right after her actual best friends, Funke and Adaisy. She was by Lagos standards a whole catch. And yet, every single family function, every single wedding, every single just come and greet my mommy visit, somebody, somewhere, was going to ask her the question. You know the one. Amara, when are we hearing your own good news now? Her Auntie Chioma asked it at Christmas. Her father's business partner asked it at a board dinner, right there in front of the finance director. God rest that man's audacity. Even Blessing asked it once, while ironing, very casually, as if she were asking about the weather. And every time, Amara would smile. That composed, practiced, I have heard this question 4,000 times smile, and say, when God is ready, Auntie.
But between you and me, God wasn't the one being slow. Amara was tired of pretending she didn't want it. Here's the truth. Nobody tells you about women like Amara. The world assumes that once a woman has money, she has stopped wanting love. As if a full bank account fills the exact same hole in your chest that a good man is supposed to fill. It doesn't. Amara had built an empire with her 2 hands, buried her father 4 years ago, carried her mother's grief and her own at the same time, and somewhere in all that carrying, she had quietly started to wonder, will anyone ever want me? Not my company, not my houses, not the Mrs. Morsel that opens doors, just me? She never said this out loud, not even to Funke and Adize, though they suspected. She just kept working, kept smiling at the question, kept going home to a beautiful, silent house, until the wedding.
It was her cousin Ifeoma's wedding, a big Owerri affair with too much aswebi and a live band that refused to stop playing even during the prayer session. Amara arrived looking like money that had learned how to relax. A deep wine-colored lace outfit, gold bangles stacked halfway up her arm, her long curly hair pulled back with delicate gold pins, and thin gold chains woven right into the curls themselves, catching the light every time she turned her head. Not just jewelry sitting on top, actually threaded through, like her hair itself had been dressed for the occasion. Sister, when Amara walked into that reception hall, 3 photographers who were supposed to be covering the couple suddenly remembered they had extra angles to capture.
She was seated at a table near the front, family table, obviously, when a man approached to greet the elders. Tall, warm brown skin, neat beard, the kind of smile that didn't try too hard. He greeted Ifeoma's father with proper respect, prostrated slightly, the way well-raised Igbo men do. And then, on his way back to his own table, he paused. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't mean to interrupt your meal. I just wanted to say, that color looks like it was made specifically for you." Amara looked up, unimpressed, ready to give the standard, "Thank you, please excuse me," that she gave every man who tried this at every wedding since she turned 30. But then he said something that stopped her. "Also, your gele is fighting your earrings for attention, and honestly, the gele is winning. That's rare." Amara laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite one she gave board members, the one that came from somewhere she hadn't used in a while. "You're either very confident or very foolish," she told him. "Ma," he said, placing a hand on his chest like he'd been wounded, "I contain both in dangerous proportions." That was Daniel Okoro.
Now, let me be honest with you, because I promised you this story wouldn't insult your intelligence. Daniel Okoro was 37, worked in real estate consulting, and had a way of making a room feel smaller and warmer just by walking into it. He wasn't flashy. He drove a decent but unremarkable SUV. He wore good, simple clothes, no logos screaming for attention. And here's what made Amara's guard slowly calm down over the following weeks. Daniel did not ask about her company. Not on the first date, not on the third, not even on the 5th, when most men would already be asking gentle, curious questions about how logistics companies typically structure ownership just out of interest. Instead, Daniel asked her things like, "What's the last thing that made you cry, that wasn't sad? If Noso Textiles disappeared tomorrow, what would you actually miss doing? Your father, tell me about him. Not the businessman, the man."
Nobody had asked Amara about her father like that since the funeral. She found herself talking for 2 hours straight one evening over suya that had gone cold, about how her father used to hum old high life songs off key while checking inventory, how he called her Adamam even after she turned 40, how he had this one strange habit of refusing, absolutely refusing, to ever discuss selling one particular piece of land out near the city outskirts. He just said, "That one is not for sale. Not now, not ever, not for any price." And when I asked why, he'd changed the subject, Amara told Daniel, stirring her drink. "I used to think he was just being sentimental." Daniel had gone very quiet for a second there. Just a second. But at the time, Amara didn't notice, because Daniel simply reached across the table, took her hand, and said, "Sounds like your father was protecting something. Fathers do that." And Amara, guarded, careful, 13 years of building walls around her heart, felt one brick quietly slide out of place. 6 weeks in, Daniel invited Amara to Sunday lunch to meet his mother. Mama Ngozi Okoro was a striking woman in her early 60s,
head tie always perfectly starched, church usher posture, the kind of woman who could compliment your dress and somehow make you feel like she just found something wrong with your entire life choices. She met Amara at the door with open arms and a voice like warm honey. "Ah, so this is the famous Amara. My son has not stopped talking about you. Amara this, Amara that. I told him, bring her. Let me see this paragono." She hugged Amara tightly, complimented her skin, her hair. And look at this hair, so healthy. And this gold, very fine, very fine. Whose work is this? Pulled her into the dining room and personally served her the biggest piece of chicken.
Amara, God help her, was charmed. She left that Sunday lunch texting Funke. "I think I actually found a good one. Mother is warm. Family seems solid. Am I dreaming?" Funke texted back, "Chai, don't jinx it. But if she's this nice already, run a background check anyway. I've seen too many Nollywood films." Amara laughed at that message. She did not run a background check. She should have.
3 months into the relationship, small things started happening. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you'd notice unless you were the type of woman who read balance sheets for a living and had trained herself to notice when numbers didn't add up. Mama Ngozi began asking, very casually, over dinner, "So, Amara, this company of your father's, it's fully yours now? No brothers wanting a share? Nothing like that?" Amara answered honestly. She was an only child. Everything had passed to her. 2 weeks later, "And the properties? Your father had property outside Lagos too, didn't he? I heard somewhere. Old family land?" Amara found this a little odd, but reasoned that mothers ask about these things. It's practically a Nigerian mother's constitutional right to inquire about a potential daughter-in-law's assets. She answered without much thought. Yes, there was an old piece of land near the city outskirts. Nothing developed on it. Her father never let anyone touch it. Mama Ngozi's smile, Amara would later recall, had flickered, just slightly, like a bulb about to blow. Then Daniel started asking too. Gently, casually, woven into pillow talk and lazy Sunday conversations. "Does anyone manage that land for you? Do you ever think of developing it? Could be worth a lot? Would you ever consider selling it if the price was right?" Amara, in love and unsuspicious, answered each question the way you answer questions from someone you trust, freely, without calculating the weight of her words. She had no idea she was handing them a map. 6 months after that wedding, Daniel proposed. He did it properly, got down on one knee on the balcony of her Lekki duplex at sunset. No crowd, no cameras, no Instagram bait production. Just her, him, and a ring that wasn't obnoxiously large, which somehow made Amara trust it more. "I know you've spent your whole life being the strong one," he said. "Let me be strong for you sometimes. Just let me in." Sister. If Amara's mother had been there, she would have needed her blood pressure medication and a chair, quickly. Amara said yes. The wedding planning began immediately, at the speed only Nigerian mothers can generate. Asoebi committees were formed, caterers were interviewed like they were applying for federal government jobs. Mama Ngozi took charge of small details with an enthusiasm that Amara, at the time, mistook for love. She should have mistaken it for something else. It happened on a random Tuesday evening. Amara had arrived early to Daniel's family house for a dress fitting, letting herself in through the side door the way she always did now. She was practically family. She heard voices from the sitting room, Mama Ngozi and Daniel, speaking in their language. The one from Daniel's hometown, the one Amara had heard around her 100 times and had always assumed, correctly, that she was never meant to understand.
Except
Amara's maternal grandmother, her mother's mother, the fierce, funny old woman who raised Amara for 3 years as a child while her parents built the business from nothing, was from that exact same ethnic group. And Grandma Nwanyi had one rule. In her house, you spoke her language or you didn't eat. Amara had learnt it at 6 years old over pounded yam and correction slaps to the back of the hand for mixing up her tenses. She had never told Daniel, never told Mama Ngozi. It simply never came up, and somewhere along the way, without ever deciding to, she'd let them believe otherwise. She stood frozen in the hallway now, listening, and what she heard made her blood run cold. Mama Ngozi's voice, sharp. "Have you gotten her to sign anything about that land yet?" Daniel, sighing. "Mama, not yet. I'm working on it slowly. If I push too fast, she'll suspect something."
We don't have slowly, Daniel. Do you understand what is buried on that property? Do you understand what happens if someone else finds it before us? A pause, then Daniel, quieter. You still haven't told me exactly what's out there, Mama. Every time I ask, you change the subject. Mama Ngozi's voice went cold. You don't need to know everything. You need to marry her, and you need to get that land signed over to this family. That is all you need to focus on. And then, the line that would replay in Amara's mind for the rest of her life. That bush woman with her city money doesn't even know what she's sitting on. Let her enjoy her wedding dress. Once that land is ours, she can keep the company. She can keep her pride. We only need the land. Daniel laughed, a short, low laugh.
Amara stood in that hallway, one hand pressed flat against the wall, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they'd hear it through the door. Sister, sister, her wedding dress was already at the tailor. Her invitation cards were already printed. And the man who had asked her what made her cry that wasn't sad, that same man was in the next room, calmly discussing how to take her father's land. What would you have done? Amara did something very few people would have had the discipline to do. She smoothed down her blouse, she fixed her face, and she knocked on the door, sweetly, and said, "Good evening all. I'm here for the fitting. Hope I'm not late." Neither Daniel nor his mother suspected a single thing. Because why would they? As far as they knew, Amara nor Sue didn't understand a word they just said.
They had no idea they had just declared war in front of the one woman in Lagos who understood every syllable. The days after that hallway conversation, Amara did something that should honestly be taught in business schools. She kept functioning like completely normal. She went for the dress fitting. She twirled in front of the mirror and told the tailor the waist needed just a small adjustment, nothing serious. She sat through Mama Ngozi's endless commentary about Asuebi color coordination. "Amara, please, not that gold. It will clash with your hair jewelry. We want harmony, not competition." And she nodded, and she smiled, and she agreed to everything. Because Amara had learned something important in 9 years of running a company full of people who underestimated her. The moment you show your hand, you lose the game. That night, when Daniel called to say goodnight, his voice syrup-sweet as always, Amara called into her bed, her gold-threaded curls spread across the pillow, and said, "I miss you already."
Sister, the performance of the century. Meryl Streep should be taking notes. She hung up the phone, stared at her ceiling, and let herself cry, just for 10 minutes. She gave herself exactly 10 minutes to grieve the man she thought she'd found. Then she wiped her face, sat up, and said out loud, to nobody, "Okay, Enough. Now we walk. The next morning, Amara did not call Daniel. She called Funke and Adaidze and said 4 words that made both women drop what they were doing and drive to her house within the hour. I need you too. Now, when Amara told them what she'd heard, the land, the bushwoman comment, the cold calculation in Daniel's voice, Funke, bless her, did not do the calm, supportive friend thing. Funke stood up so fast, she knocked over a glass of Chapman.
I said run a background check. Did I not say it? Amara, I sent that text with my whole chest. Funke, sit down. I am sitting down in my spirit. My body is still standing because I am angry, Amara. Adaidze, calmer, more strategic. The kind of friend who reads terms and conditions before signing anything, took Amara's hand instead. Okay, first things first. Are you safe? Do they suspect you heard them? No, I don't think so. Good. Adaidze's eyes narrowed. Then we don't tell them anything. We find out exactly what they're after, and we find out before they realize you already know.
Funke, still fuming, flopped onto the couch. So, we're doing this the smart way. Fine. But I want it on record that when this Daniel's downfall comes, I want front row seats. I want popcorn. I want a whole soundtrack. Amara actually laughed. First real laugh in 2 days. Noted, she said. You'll get your soundtrack. Every empire has an attic, and every attic has boxes nobody has opened since the person who packed them died. Amara's father's boxes were in the storeroom of the Lekki house, 11 of them, labeled in his careful handwriting, most containing exactly what you'd expect: old invoices, expired contracts, tax documents older than some of Amara's employees. But one box was different. It was smaller, unlabeled, taped shut twice, as if someone hadn't trusted the first layer. Amara sat on the storeroom floor in an old wrapper, hair tied back with a simple gold clip for once. No time for elaborate styling when you are excavating your father's secrets. And pried it open. Inside, a stack of documents from a company called Okoro Nusu Ventures Limited. Amara went very, very still. Okoro, as in Daniel's surname. She read through the papers with the same focus she used to review million-naira contracts. A partnership, formed 26 years ago, between her father, Emeka Nusu, and a man named Obina Okoro, Daniel's father.
Sister, sit down somewhere, because this is not a coincidence. This is not fate. This is a story that started before Daniel and Amara were even old enough to fall in love. And somebody has been counting on Amara never finding this box. The partnership papers showed the 2 men had jointly purchased a piece of land, the exact plot her father had refused to sell for 20 years, and had built a small import business together, textiles and construction materials, based out of a modest warehouse near the property. Then, 3 years in, the document simply stopped. No dissolution papers, no sale agreement, just a single letter yellowed with age in her father's handwriting, addressed to nobody. I cannot in good conscience continue as a witness to this. Whatever comes of this decision, I will protect what is right, even if it costs me the friendship.
The following week, Amara visited Barrister Michael Adisa, her father's old lawyer, now well into his 70s, still sharp as a new machete, walking out of a small office in Ikeja that smelled like old paper and alabukun powder. She didn't tell him everything, just enough. Uncle Michael, I found some old partnership documents, Okoro Nusu Ventures. Do you remember anything about it? The old man's face changed instantly. He set down his tea. Ah, that one. He was quiet for a moment. I was asked by your father to never discuss that matter with anyone, even you. He's been dead 4 years, Uncle Michael, and I am still his lawyer, my dear. A dead client is still a client, my dear. Now, Amara, being Amara, she did not beg, she did not cry. She simply looked the old man dead in the eye and said the one thing that could crack 70 years of professional discretion. Uncle Michael, I am about to marry into that family in 6 weeks. If there is something dangerous in that history, I need to know before I sign my whole life over to them. That did it. Barrister Adisa sighed the sigh of a man who had been waiting 26 years to finally put a burden down. There was fraud, he said carefully. A big contract, government supply deal, construction materials, very lucrative. Obina Okoro was managing the finances. Money went missing, a lot of money. When the partners who'd invested came asking questions, Obina tried to convince your father to falsify records, to make it look like a smaller, more innocent discrepancy. Your father refused.
And then the whole thing collapsed. Obina blamed your father publicly, told everyone Emeka had frozen him out, stolen his share, forced him into ruin. Half of Lagos business circles believed him. It destroyed your father's reputation for almost a decade until people forgot. Amara's hands were shaking now. And the land? Barrister Adisa looked at her very seriously. Your father kept records, real ones, bank statements, correspondence, proof of exactly where the missing money went and to whom. He hid them somewhere on that land before the business dissolved. I don't know exactly where. He never told even me the precise location, because he said, and I quote him exactly, "If I keep it in a bank, it can be stolen or destroyed. If I bury it in the ground my grandfather walked on, no one will think to look."
Amara sat back in her chair, feeling the entire shape of the last 6 months rearrange itself in her mind. Daniel hadn't fallen in love with her by accident. He'd been sent. One more piece of the puzzle remained, and it was the one that made Amara's stomach turn the most. What happened to Obina, Daniel's father? Barrister Adisa's face grew somber. He died 2 years after the business collapsed. Officially, a car accident, late at night, on a road he had driven 1,000 times, sober. Unofficially, my dear, there were people who whispered that a man that deep in debt, that desperate, that many people angry at him, such a man attracts trouble that doesn't always come from the road.
Amara left that office with more questions than answers, but one thing was now crystal clear. This was never a simple case of a family wanting money. This was a 26-year-old cover-up, and Mama Ngozi, young Ngozi Okoro, newly widowed, raising a son alone, had spent every single year since building a story in which her husband was the victim and Amara's father was the villain. And now her son was about to marry the villain's daughter. Convenient or calculated?
Back at home, Amara did something dangerous but necessary. She started testing the waters. Over dinner one evening, jollof rice, plantain, Daniel's favorite, she said, very casually, stirring her rice, "You know, I've been thinking about that land my father left. My lawyer says I should probably just sell it. It's dead weight, honestly. No use to anyone." Daniel's fork paused in mid-air, just for a second, a single second. But Amara had spent 9 years reading boardrooms full of men trying to hide bad news in good numbers.
she saw it. "Sell it," he said, voice carefully light. "Why not just hold on to it? Land only appreciates, my love. Rushing to sell rarely makes financial sense."
Maybe, I don't know. Feels like a burden I don't need going into the marriage. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. The same gesture, the same warmth, but Amara now watched it with new eyes, the way you'd watch a magic trick once you knew where the second deck of cards was hidden. "Let's talk about it after the wedding," he said gently. "No rush. Let's just focus on us right now." Us. Amara almost laughed out loud. There was no us. There had never been an us. There had only ever been a plan, and she was simply a very well-dressed obstacle standing in its way. She smiled instead. "Okay, after the wedding then." That night, Amara called Barrister Adisa and gave him a very specific, very quiet instruction. Begin preparing airtight legal protections on that land. Trusts, title locks, documentation so thorough that not even the most creative lawyer in Lagos could find a crack to slip through. By the time Daniel's family got their hands anywhere near that property, there would be nothing left to get their hands on.
2 weeks before the wedding, Amara arrived at the Okoro house for what was supposed to be a simple menu tasting. She let herself in the side door, as usual. And once again, voices from the sitting room, in the language. "You already know what's about to happen, don't you? Sister, these people never learn." Mama Ngozi's voice, tight with fear this time, not confidence. "Daniel, why is her lawyer suddenly locking up that land? Trusts? Title protections? That is not normal for a woman about to hand her whole life to a man." "Maybe it's routine, Mama. Rich people do this kind of thing all the time." "Routine? Emeka Nusu's daughter is not a routine woman. Have you forgotten whose blood runs in her? That man hid evidence for 20 years without one single slip. You think his daughter does anything by accident?" A long silence. Then Mama Ngozi again, quieter, almost to herself. "If she finds what's buried on that land before the wedding, everything I have built, everything I have protected, it will all collapse. Do you understand me, Daniel? Everything." Daniel's voice, for the first time in this entire story, sounded uncertain. "Mama, what exactly is on Atnand? You still haven't told me. If I'm going to marry this woman under false pretenses, I think I deserve to know what I'm actually risking." And Mama Ngozi said something that made Amara, standing frozen in that hallway once again, press her hand flat against her own chest to keep her heart from leaping straight out of it. "You want to know the truth, Daniel? Fine. The truth is that your father did not simply lose that money to bad luck. And the truth is that I did not simply stand by and watch it happen." The line went dead silent.
The phone that rang and cut off Mama Ngozi's confession haunted Amara for 3 straight days. She had come so close to the truth, she could taste it, and then nothing. So Amara did what any woman who built an empire from a textile shop would do. She stopped waiting for the truth to fall in her lap and went to go dig it out herself. She called Barrister Adisa. "Uncle Michael, my father's old warehouse, the one from the partnership, is it still standing?" "Falling apart but standing. Why?" "Because I think that's where he buried it. Not the open land, the warehouse floor."
2 days later, with a quiet contractor Adisa trusted, and absolutely nobody from the Okoro family aware, Amara stood in that dusty, abandoned warehouse and watched a loose section of concrete near the old office floor get pried open. Underneath, a rusted metal box. Inside it, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow survived 26 years, bank statements, a signed letter, and photographs of Obina Okoro handing an envelope of cash to a much younger Ngozi outside a bank that had, records showed, quietly flagged unusual withdrawal activity that same year. The final piece was a single handwritten note in her father's hand. Ngozi asked Obina to move the money before the auditors arrived. She knew everything. I have proof. I will not destroy a man's family to expose his wife, but I will never let them take what isn't theirs.
The Nwosu Okoro wedding was set to be the event of the season. 500 guests, 3 outfit changes, a live band flown in from Enugu. Amara walked into the church looking, frankly, unfairly beautiful. Ivory and gold lace, her long curls swept up and threaded through with delicate gold combs that caught the light with every step, a face that gave nothing away. Funke, holding her bouquet backstage, whispered, "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Amara said calmly. "Because I can still cause a sin. I have been practicing." Amara actually laughed. "Save it for after the vows." Daniel stood at the altar, handsome, nervous, believing, truly believing that in 20 minutes he'd be a married man with a signed land transfer waiting in his mother's handbag for after the honeymoon. He had no idea his bride had spent the last 2 weeks quietly transferring that same land into an irrevocable trust that not even a husband's signature could touch. The vows happened. Rings were exchanged. 500 guests clapped. Mama Ngozi cried real tears. Tears of triumph, though nobody but Amara understood that. At the reception, during the toast, Mama Ngozi stood, glass raised, and, in their language, leaning close to Daniel, believing herself safely surrounded by only family, muttered with a satisfied smile, "Finally, 26 years, and finally it is ours." Daniel smiled back at his mother and murmured, she really never suspected a thing.
Amara, microphone already in hand for the customary bride's toast, turned. She looked directly at Mama Ngozi, and she spoke. In their language, fluently, calmly, perfectly. "You're right, Mama. It has been 26 years." The band kept playing for exactly 3 more seconds before someone signaled them to stop. The room went utterly silent. Mama Ngozi's champagne glass hovered, forgotten, halfway to her lips. Daniel's face drained of every ounce of color it had. "I've understood every word you've ever said around me," Amara continued, still in their language, still calm, still smiling that same composed smile she'd worn in board meetings for 9 years. The bushwoman comments, the land, the plan to get it signed over after the honeymoon, all of it. She switched, deliberately, to English, so all 500 guests could understand exactly what came next.
My grandmother raised me for 3 years and taught me her language. I never told anyone. I never saw a reason to, until I heard my future mother-in-law discussing fraud and my future husband discussing how quickly he could get his hands on my father's land. Gasps rippled through the hall. Auntie Chioma's fan stopped mid-fan. "So here is what's going to happen," Amara continued, holding up a folder Funke had been guarding in her bag all evening. "This land is already protected in an irrevocable trust. It cannot be signed away, transferred, or touched by anyone but me. Inside this folder is proof that Obina Okoro stole from a government contract 26 years ago, and proof that his wife helped him move the money before the auditors arrived. My father kept it to protect an innocent family from a scandal. I am no longer feeling that generous." Mama Ngozi's legs actually gave a little. Somebody's uncle caught her chair before it toppled. Daniel found his voice first, panicked, reaching for Amara's hand. "Amara, please, I didn't know the whole story. I swear, I only—"
Amara pulled her hand back, gently but firmly. You knew enough, Daniel. You knew enough to ask me questions about my father's land in bed. You knew enough to laugh with your mother about how easily I trusted you. That's enough for me. She turned to the stunned crowd, fat, frozen mid-canopy. The marriage certificate signed 20 minutes ago will be filed for annulment by Monday morning, on ground I am confident my lawyer will have no trouble proving. Thank you all for coming. Please, enjoy the rest of the small chops. I paid for them, and they're excellent. Sister, only Amara Nosu could file for annulment and make sure nobody left hungry.
She walked out of that hall in her ivory and gold, curls catching the chandelier light, Funke and Adaeze flanking her like bodyguards, leaving behind a room full of 500 people who would be telling this story at every single Owerri function for the next decade. Daniel ran after her into the parking lot. Amara, please, I did fall in love with you. Somewhere in all of it, that part was real. Amara paused by her car door, looked at him one last time, and said quietly, You didn't lose me the moment I found out, Daniel. You lost me the very first time you looked at me and saw a piece of land instead of a person. I just didn't know it yet. She got in the car. Baba Segon, waiting faithfully as ever, glanced at her in the rearview mirror and asked simply, Madam, house? House, Amara said. And Baba Segon, take the long way. I want to see the sunset.
6 months later, that dusty, unremarkable piece of land on the outskirts of Lagos looked nothing like it used to. Amara had built the Emeka Nwosu Foundation on it, a vocational training center for young women, teaching tailoring, logistics, and small business management, funded entirely by Nwosu Textiles. Mama Ngozi and Obinna Okoro's old fraud case, once buried, had finally reached the authorities, quietly but thoroughly, without a single dramatic press conference. Some scandals don't need noise to land hard. Amara stood at the opening ceremony, in simple green Ankara, her curls loose and natural, just one small gold pin tucked behind her ear, no longer dressing for anyone's approval but her own. Funke leaned over. So, how does it feel? Amara looked out at the building, at the young women already lining up for the first training cohort, and smiled. A real one.
And so, my dear people, that is the story of Amara Nwosu, the woman they thought they could fool. They looked at her and saw a lonely, wealthy woman, desperate for love, easy to manipulate. They never once considered that the quiet woman scrolling through her phone, smiling politely, had understood every single word. Remember this, wherever you are watching from tonight, never mistake someone's silence for ignorance. You never know who understands every word you say when you believe they cannot hear you. If you enjoyed this story, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which moment shocked you the most. Was it the warehouse, the wedding reception, or Baba Segon asking for the long way home? Until our next story, take care of yourselves and never underestimate a quiet woman.